Today we are in science in chapter 3, lesson 4. Oh, there's a typo. It is not lesson 5, it is lesson 4. We're on page 68 through 73. We're going to do number 1, number 2, and number 3 on page 73 for homework. So, here are the steps to completing the homework. Look at the questions first, read through the questions and try to pick out some keywords. Begin to read the chapter and pay attention to the reading to see if you can find an answer to each question, and write down the answers to the questions. And then lastly, connect what you learned by creating, displaying, or showing how it relates to you. All right, so let's go. We're going to flip on to page 73 and look at just the questions. So, read each question and identify keywords to search for while reading the text. Number 1, explain how offspring can have traits that show both versions of a gene. The key words in this are explain. We need to explain how something works. We need to explain the traits and how they show both versions of a gene. Number 2, why do people use selective breeding? So we are answering why, and our keyword is selective breeding. Why do people use selective breeding? We have to answer that. And our last one is explain the process of selective breeding. So we are explaining something, and we are explaining selective breeding. All right, now we can begin our reading. How do genes determine traits? Genes work together to determine individual traits. Scientists can use what they know about how genes work to produce organisms that are more useful. Dominant and recessive traits. An individual formed by sexual reproduction gets traits from both parents. What determines each trait will show up in offspring. For example, the parent guinea pigs shown on the left have two different types of fur. One parent has smooth fur, the other has rough fur. What kind of fur will their offspring have? The offspring of the mother and father are hybrids. The mother guinea pig to the right is purebred for rough fur. The father is purebred for smooth coat. How an offspring looks depends not just on what genes it has, but also on how those genes work together. For many traits, an individual has a pair of genes, one gene from each parent, but genes have different versions. For example, one version of the gene that determines the type of coat in guinea pigs is for smooth coat. The other version is for rough coat. When the two different versions of a gene occur together, one version may show up, the other may not. A version of a gene that masks the effect of another version is called a dominant trait. The trait that is hidden is called a recessive trait. In guinea pigs, rough fur is a dominant trait. Smooth fur is a recessive trait. That means an offspring with a version of the gene for rough fur and a version for smooth fur will have rough fur. The only way a guinea pig can have smooth fur is if both versions of the gene are for smooth fur. Both versions of the gene for fur type in the mother guinea pig in the picture are dominant. These versions are represented by capital R, capital R. Each capital R represents a gene for rough coat. The father's genes are both for smooth fur, which is shown as lowercase r, lowercase r. An organism with two versions of a dominant trait or two versions of a recessive trait is called purebred for that trait. Because guinea pigs reproduce sexually, each of their babies will get one dominant version of the gene, capital R, from the mother, and one recessive version, lowercase r, from the father. The offspring's gene will be capital R, lowercase r, and they will have rough fur. An organism with one dominant and one recessive version of a trait is called a hybrid. However, if two capital R, lowercase r guinea pigs mate, each baby can receive a capital R or a lowercase r from each parent. The offspring can have one of three possible gene combinations: capital R, capital R, lowercase r, and lowercase r, lowercase r. Only the lowercase r combination will show up as a smooth coat. When two hybrids produce offspring, there is only a 1 in 4 chance that offspring will have smooth fur. All right, so what is a dominant trait? A dominant trait is a trait that shows up. It is the trait that you receive that overrules the recessive trait. We're going to move on. Oh, we're going to go over our notes for this. Instead of taking notes for this assignment, I went ahead and I highlighted some important things from this section. It's important that you also start to take notes, and these are just a few of the different, I've been trying to make the videos different so you can see the different ways to take notes or to just receive information in a more visual way so that you are learning. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the next page. Sharing dominance. Not all gene pairs follow the dominant recessive pattern. Some traits, such as the color of the erminate chicken pictured below, show both versions of a gene at work. The chicken has genes for both black and white feathers, but neither color is dominant. Instead, the colors share dominance. As you can see in the diagram, the erminate chicken was produced by a parent with white feathers and a parent with black feathers. The diagram is called a Punnett square. It is used to show all the possible offspring with a particular trait that can result when two individuals mate. In this Punnett square, one parent chicken was purebred for black feathers, which is represented by two genes for black feathers, lowercase b, lowercase b. The other parent was purebred for white feathers, lowercase w, lowercase w. The possible offspring from these two parents would all be hybrids. Each would have one gene for white feathers and one for black feathers, capital B, capital W. Offspring with those two versions of the gene would have both black and white feathers, like the eminent chicken. What would happen if two eminent chickens mated and produced offspring? Study the second Punnett square to find out. Now look at the Punnett square for color and 4 o'clock plants. One parent has red flowers, and the other has white. You probably would expect the offspring to have red or white flowers, but in this case, neither color is present in the offspring. Instead of red or white, the offspring are pink. 4 o'clock plants do not follow the dominant recessive pattern. With some traits, such as color in 4 o'clock plants, the effects of two genes appear to blend. The red 4 o'clock parent and the white 4 o'clock parent produced pink offspring, a blending of the red and white colors of the parent plants. But what would happen if the pink offspring reproduced? As you can see, the possible offspring could be red, white, or pink. Look at the second Punnett square to see how that could happen. You can see a similar example in humans. A child of a straight-haired parent and a curly-haired parent will have wavy hair. Two parents with wavy hair can have children with wavy hair, straight hair, or curly hair. We're going to move on to page 72, but first I'm going to show you what I highlighted. These are strategies that you should be using as you read through on your own. Now we're on choosing traits. The familiar ear of corn, shown to the left, is probably not much like its wild ancestor. Around 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, people in what is now Mexico began to change a grass-like plant they had been gathering in nature for food. They did this by choosing and planting seeds from plants that had traits they liked. When the new plants produced seeds, the people again chose the best seeds. This process continued for many generations of plants. Over time, a plant that served as better food resulted, an early version of the corn we eat today. Selecting a few organisms with desired traits to serve as parents of offspring is called selective breeding. Now, this is something that's kind of hard to understand until you think of watermelon. There's seeded watermelon and there's seedless watermelon. That is a result of choosing the traits of the watermelon. It's selective breeding. People around the world use selective breeding to produce plants and animals with traits that are valuable to humans. Cows have not always produced as much milk as they do now. In the early 1800s, most dairy cows made only about 1,500 liters of milk a year. Today, some kinds of cows can make as much as 10,000 liters a year. Other kinds produce milk with certain traits, such as a high amount of fat. How did these changes happen? The traits were produced through selective breeding and better nutrition. Selective breeding also helps produce crops with more food per plant. Many varieties of fruits and vegetables are bred to resist diseases, insect pests, and drought. People have raised chickens that lay more eggs. Selective breeding has been used to produce dogs that are smarter, stronger, healthier, and friendlier. Today, dogs come in many shapes and sizes, from the tiny Chihuahua to the large Saint Bernard. But they're, they are also some of humans' oldest friends. Ancient clues in cave paintings and burials reveal that dogs and people have lived together for thousands of years. Dogs of many sizes and shapes appear in the archaeological records of almost all human cultures from thousands of years ago. Selected for hunting, herding, protection, companionship or looks, dogs were welcomed into many homes. Over the years, people have used selective breeding to produce the characteristics they choose. Most of today's almost 400 different dog breeds were produced after 1850. Luther Burbank. In the history of selective breeding, perhaps no one has been more successful than Luther Burbank, who was born in Massachusetts in 1849. Luther Burbank developed more than 800 varieties of plants. You may have eaten some of the new varieties of plums, pineapples, walnuts, and almonds that he developed. One of Burbank's most important success was the development of the Burbank potato. At the time, the potato was an important food for many people in Ireland. When a disease called potato blight killed potato crops in Ireland for several years, these people did not have enough to eat. Eventually, as many as 1 million people in Ireland died because of this potato disease. The Burbank potato was resistant to potato blight. It was shipped to Ireland to be planted in place of the diseased potatoes. The potato helped prevent even more deaths. Alright, so after reading this page, I went through and I highlighted what I thought was important. So now we need to look at the assignment. Number 1, explain how offspring can have traits that show both versions of a gene. Hint, what 2 types of traits are there? Which is stronger and which is weaker? This will help you. Number 2, why do people use selective breeding? Hint, humans do this for many, many reasons, but what is the overall main reason? They talk about it a lot. And then number 3, explain the process of selective breeding. I want you to create a keynote tutorial for how selective breeding works. Use examples like dogs, cows, corn, and chickens. How does it benefit us? What is the point? Just tell me those things. All right. Here's like a little quiz at the end about genes and traits. I want you to think about this. If this couple had a baby, what skin color would it have? What is that considered? We talked about it in the section with the white and the red flowers. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about how it will apply to humans and our lives. It was blending. Can you determine what trait the mom in this picture had that would have been dominant by looking at the baby? There's a few of them. Red hair, dimples, blue eyes, and a pointed nose. If you look at the mom, she and the baby look very similar. The baby has a dimple on its right cheek, just like the mom. The eyes are very similar, the red hair, and the nose. So this is the lesson this is chapter 3, lesson 4. So go ahead and get started on your homework.